Well, hello, With Gratitude Matt listeners. My name is Matt Moran, and I'm the host for the With Gratitude Matt show. Our goal with the show is to inspire our listeners to practice gratitude, regardless of how powerful their storm is. I've learned that the practice of gratitude works much like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it becomes. I've been so inspired by so many of my guests, and today's guest can be added to the list. Chris Norton is today's guest. He is the son of Deb and Terry Norton, who we had on the show about a year ago. Chris also has two sisters who are big supporters of her with love and care. Chris was raised in Des Moines, Iowa, and was an avid sports fan growing up. He took his athletic career to Luther College, where he played football. In 2010, his life changed forever on a tackle in his freshman year, where Chris was paralyzed on that one play. I remember this because I got to know his father, Terry, while he was a training instructor at the work that I was doing at the time. I was simply amazed at how Chris transformed his life and is inspiring so many worldwide by speaking and talking openly about his accident and how it taught him lessons of life. The movie 7 Yards, which has been a huge hit, gives you an up close look at the accident and his rehabilitation journey that he's on today. It is simply amazing. He and his wife, Emily, live in Florida today with their 8 children. And yes, I did say 8 children. Chris, welcome to the show.
Hey, Matt, thank you for having me.
No, it's great to have you, Chris. And I think um, a good place for us to start would be just talking about your upbringing. And I mentioned your parents, Deb and Terry Norton. We had them on the show about a year ago or so, and I'd love to hear what you recall about growing up as their son in Des Moines, Iowa.
Yeah, I can remember everything really involved around sports. I was a competitor. I loved any sort of game. It could be a board game, card game, especially sports and just being active. And my dad, he was also just a huge fan of sports and coached everything. So he coached me in soccer, basketball, football, baseball. I mean, any sport. He was going to coach it in some way. He just loved to be involved. So we really bonded over that. And my mom, she also loved sports and was a competitive as well. But I don't know. We've always been really close. We've always made sure that we spent plenty of family time together. While I was very social and active with my activities and friends, I know something that was important to us was to have our own time on Sundays. Was kind of our family day to go to a movie or just hang out with one another and play games. But I was very fortunate to have such a great, loving, supportive family that um, you just you never doubted whether you belonged or you were wanted. They always were able to communicate how much they loved me. So yeah, just a great upbringing, and they really helped fuel that fire for me of sports.
It's not surprising at all, having gotten to know your father through working together, and he was in the training department, and he's just always amazed me about how giving he has been and caring, and I'm sure that it was nice to feel that directly at home. I mentioned you played football at Luther College. How did you end up selecting Luther? I know it's close by relatively to Des Moines, but love to hear how you selected Luther.
Yeah, they were recruiting me for basketball and football. There was other schools recruiting me, and to be honest, I didn't give Luther much of a shot just because I was kind of lazy to do proper visits to there because it's a 3 hour drive. It's kind of in the middle of nowhere. It's not like along any major interstate or anything that I mean, if you're going to go to Decorah, Iowa, like you're very intentional about going there. It's not like on the way to something. Whereas places like Central College, that was also recruiting me really hard. It was more of a 45-minute drive and uh, not too far from my home. So that kind of, for me, almost in a way, was just kind of the low hanging fruit of, they have a good football program, um, close to everything that at home, but yet far enough to get away. So I'll go to Central College. But then I had an assistant football coach at my high school who I was really close with. He always kind of looked out for me. He was a Luther alum. And he told me, like, Chris, I just don't think it's a good fit for you. And I really, truly believe you need to give Luther one more chance. You need to do one more visit. And so I set up, out of respect for him, I set up an overnight visit at Luther College to give it like a real chance to go there. I fell in love with it. I just the guys, the atmosphere, the school. It was I was just so taken away by how much I felt called to go there. And so I'm really appreciative that my coach really kind of gave me that nudge of like, don't be lazy, make that time and go to school there. But they have great academics. It's a beautiful campus and there's hills, there's bluffs. It doesn't really feel like you're in Iowa because Iowa's pretty flat and lots of cornfields is what everyone kind of assumes with it. But Decorah is unlike any part of Iowa.
That's beautiful. So I mentioned, on the introduction that during your freshman year, and you make a tackle on I think it was on the kickoff, if I'm not mistaken. That tackle changed your life forever. What do you recall about that day leading up to that tackle?
Well, I remember me and my roommate and one of my best friends, Rich, we made plans to go to his hometown. I was going to stay with his family, meet some of his high school buddies. They were going to all get together. So we were planning around that. I was also looking forward to, it was going to be fall break for us. So pretty much like a spring break, but in the fall. So I was um, looking forward to that time to get a break from school. But I was felt like on top of the world. I was working my way up the depth charts. I was playing more than any other freshman at the time, really starting to get a respect behind my name. And so it was this beautiful fall day. The leaves in the trees are changing colors. It's partly cloudy, low 60s. You just can't really ask for better football weather. I had my family in the stands. And it was the third quarter when we started to mount a comeback, and it was against Central College, the school that I was originally committed
Wow.
to and then kind of last minute decommitted. And they were beating us, but we just scored a touchdown. We're within, I think, like 11 points, kind of working our way back in the game. We had a lot of the momentum. And so for this kickoff, we decided to do a mortar kick, which is a short, high arching kick. And it was to the right side of the field, which is the side that I'm playing on. And I was excited because, this is another chance for me to keep the momentum on our side and to really put a hit on somebody and hopefully cause them to fumble the ball. Well, I line up, the ball's kicked. I'm sprinting downfield as hard as I can go. I see an opening forming, and my instincts are telling me, okay, that ball carrier, he's going to try running through that gap. Now I'm going to stop. I'm going to drive my shoulders so hard through his legs that hopefully he will drop the ball. And I go for it. I collide with him at full speed, full force, but I mistime my tackle by a split second. Instead of getting my head in front of the ball carrier, my head collided right with his legs. In an instant, I lose all feeling of movement from my neck down. I'm listening to the sounds of players crashing to each other above me. The whistle blows, a pile clears off, but I can't get up. As hard as I try to push through the ground, nothing in my body's working. I'm completely conscious. I'm not in any pain or discomfort whatsoever. I just can't move. I thought it was a really bad stinger at first, where your body kind of goes numb for a little bit and then it comes back, almost like a Novocaine wearing off. Well, I'm waiting there, and the athletic trainers and everybody gets involved, and they're asking me questions. Chris, can you make a fist with your hand? I couldn't do it. Chris, can you feel us touching your legs? Couldn't feel a thing. And it just felt like someone flipped the power off to my body. And what I didn't realize at the time was I suffered a severe spinal cord injury, and my life was about to drastically change.
That's for sure. And maybe if you could share with our listeners what took place, call it the next several days as you were transferred. I think you were helicoptered to a uh, emergency room, but what took place over the next several days, weeks, as you learned, how severe the injury was and began the rehabilitation.
Yeah, I was flown out to Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota right away. I took about a 30-minute flight. They did some checks and scans and x-rays to get me ready for surgery. I put to sleep, and I'm told that I have a 3% chance to ever move or feel below the neck. And that's not a 3% chance to walk, it's a 3% chance to scratch an itch on your face, to feed yourself. It's all so surreal. I could hardly process it because yesterday at this time I was walking. I was suiting up for my college football game, and now I'm lying in the hospital paralyzed from the neck down with a 3% chance to ever move or feel again. And so I remember being just numb to it all as the surgeon's explaining everything that's has happened to me, and then I get mad. I tell myself, no way, not me. I'm not going to be part of the 97% who don't recover from this. I will do whatever it takes to be a member of that 3%. And so I take on, what I call radical responsibility of just focusing on what you can control. And the only thing I could control at the time was my attitude and effort. And so I just worked as hard as I possibly could and did the only movement I could do, which was to nod my head yes and no. And so I nodded my head yes and no for hours. I looked like a giant bobblehead, just kind of bouncing my head around. And eventually I just kept slowly getting a little bit more feeling, a little bit more movement back.
When I watched the movie and paid attention to that, you talking specifically about that 3%. Um, what caught me is, yeah, I mean, that what they didn't realize is those statistics didn't include Chris Norton in there. So it was not surprising that you were part of that 3%, and it's your story is just amazing. One of the things that caught me was the response from the physical therapy staff. They've never, I think, worked with somebody that was as diligent and resilient as you were. Where do you think you touched on growing up with your parents, Deb and Terry? I mean, how important do you think that your upbringing was on how you responded to this injury?
I think it was huge. My upbringing and then just the experience with sports and that competition, because you learn that if you want to get the results, you got to put in the work. Like it's just not going to magically happen. And growing up, I was a pretty good athlete. I was a pretty natural athlete, but I also the the expectations I had for myself and where I wanted to go, I wasn't there naturally, and so I knew I had to work extremely hard. And so I was learned through experience that wow, you got to work hard for everything you want. And so being in that situation where I wanted to get out of that hospital, I wanted to get my movement back. I knew it was going to take a lot of hard work, and I wasn't afraid to put in that work. And one story in particular from my upbringing is like I was about like 11 years old. I'm on my way home from a basketball tournament. I'm fighting back tears in my eyes because I felt like I had the worst weekend of basketball of my life. I was missing my shots, turning the ball over, hurting my team more than I was helping them. I knew I was capable of so much more. And then to make matters worse, I have to ride home with my coach, who is also my dad. And so I'm keeping my head down, avoiding the angry glares from the rearview mirror. I get home, kick my shoes off. I go straight to the couch to distract myself with TV, video games, trying to pretend and ignore my problems were even there. And as I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, man, if only I was taller, faster, had my own personal gym, then, ooh, I'd be a really good basketball player. Well, a couple hours of this goes by, and my dad, he sits next to me on the couch, talk about the weekend. And he tells me something I'll never forget. He says, Chris, if you don't like where you're at, then do something about it. If you don't like where you're at, then do something about it. And as easy and as obvious as that statement is, for whatever reason, those words, they clicked for me. Why feel sorry for yourself when you're not willing to do anything to change? Blaming your circumstances isn't going to help. And if you want to get better results, then you have to get better. There's no shortcut in life. And so I got up off that couch. I went outside and I shot baskets until it was dark. And this was a huge turning point in my life when I began to accept more ownership for my outcomes. And essentially, my daddy taught me the importance of being radically responsible for your life. And not some responsibility, but a complete responsibility for all outcomes, the good and the bad, the failures and successes, the healthy and unhealthy relationships. Because what I found is the more responsibility you can accept, the better you'll respond to adversity. The quickest way that you can become more responsible for your life is to practice cutting out blame, the need to complain, and all excuses, because these behaviors, they keep you stuck. They prevent you from doing all that you can do. And you know you're practicing radical responsibility when you realize that the only thing you truly have control over in life is how you respond. I had no idea as a kid how empowering that lesson would be then later on in my life.
That's amazing that you were able to learn that at 11 years old. I was talking earlier about the physical therapist. You had an army of support around you to get you to where you are today. I know your sister sacrificed quite a bit. She recently, she at the time she recently graduated from nursing school and moved nearby to Luther. What was that like having your sister nearby you as you went back to school?
It was kind of my safety blanket of I was going to back to college, a place where I only spent 8 weeks there. And while I only knew my friends and classmates for 8 weeks prior to my injury, I did feel a pretty close, intimate connection with them where I just felt like they really cared for me. But you still don't know. I'm going to be 3 hours away. But having my sister there, I knew I would always be looked out for. I knew I always had someone there that had my back no matter what. And while I got a good feeling that my friends were had my back at that point, you still worry a little bit. And I know, especially my mom, she worries all the time. But so it was just like a really special thing that she was willing to kind of give all of us that peace of mind that we had each other and that we were going to figure this out together. And so she really stepped up to drive me to doctor and therapy appointments. And every Tuesday and Thursday, we would drive 90 minutes to Rochester, Minnesota to do 3, 4 hours of therapy and then drive another 90 minutes back. And then once we got back, we would do another couple hours of training in the gym. And then after that, we were doing schoolwork. Like she was just by my side and really helped me get adjusted and acclimated back to school and really figure out life and from a wheelchair as I was still adjusting to my new circumstance and conditions.
That's remarkable that she did just that. What do you recall about the uh, way the Luther College or the Luther community embraced you coming back on campus? What do you recall about that?
Well, I was worried because I was still kind of struggling with my identity because I always kind of pride myself on being this strong, athletic kid. I was a competitor. I viewed myself as this kind of masculine, macho man. Then all of a sudden, I'm, you know, not that. At least I felt that way. And so while I took pride in my strength and my accomplishments and uh, my how I play sports, what I found is that's not what other people care about. What they actually care about is who you are as a person. And so I think that was a great kind of a wake up call for me of what really matters. And then I was also then, I never really lost that identity because, what does it take to be an athlete? Well, it takes determination, it takes teamwork, it takes just hard work. And so you can still apply all those things to almost any aspect of your life. And then also, Luther College was great in trying to setting up my dorm to be accessible. And then they also helped. It was a dorm that was supposed to be just for upperclassmen, but as sophomores, they let us have our own, area where I could get some of my friends to also live right next to me, so they could all help and look out for me.
That's remarkable. One of the things you mentioned that your mother's a worrier, and I know one thing that she did worry about was, is Chris ever going to meet somebody that he can marry, spend the rest of his life with? And I know she was delighted when you met Emily. Um, Tell me what you recall about bringing Emily back to Des Moines for the first time.
Yeah, well, I'll never forget meeting her for the first time because we actually didn't go to the same school. She went to Iowa State University at the time, and we happened to connect online and just started messaging from there. And then I knew I just wanted to meet her, so I could just tell she's special. Uh, just by the way, her curiosity and how much she cared and loved other people was just remarkable. And so I made up an excuse of why I was going to be at Iowa State University when she was going to be there moving in. And so I, called up some buddies that were going to school there and like, hey, can I crash with you this weekend? I'm going to try to meet this girl. And so I made up an excuse we found some public area that we could safely meet and didn't give her any fears or worries. Although I was trying to invite her over to my buddy's house because it's just easier for me because I'm in a wheelchair. It's harder to get in and out of vehicles or in and out of the house. And, it might just be convenient if she just joined us here. And she's like, I'm not coming over to some stranger's house. Like, I don't know you. I'm like, oh yeah, I guess that makes sense. But at first I'm like, oh, maybe she doesn't want to meet. And then she offered to pick me up with her car, this little yellow car. I was like, do you realize like my circumstance and my situation with my wheelchair and how I'm paralyzed? Like that's a complicated thing, and you're not going to just be able to move me around or load up my wheelchair. So that also concerned me as far as, does she understand the gravity of my injury? We talked about it. She knew I was in a wheelchair, but maybe she didn't understand the extent of that. So that also added into my concerns of whether this is going to work or not. But we met this public park spot. She was beautiful, and then she also just had a heart that was just caring and accepting. It was never. We just hit it off from there. The rest is history, I guess they say.
You know, um, I didn't realize that she was at Iowa State. Did she ultimately move to Luther with you, or did she finish up at Iowa State?
She actually finished up at the University of Northern Iowa, which, well, I liked because it was, instead of her being like 3 hours away, she ended up being like an hour and 15, hour and a half away. So it shortened our distance from each other.
Got it. Okay, that's really cool. Your mom and dad, when I talked to them, they mentioned that you kind of have this go home or go big or go home mentality,
Mhm.
and you were getting ready to graduate uh, from Luther, but leading up to that, you were doing some extra training because you had a big surprise in mind, not only for Emily but also for your entire class. Walk us through what graduation weekend looked like for you and Emily and your entire family.
Yeah, so I had set a goal that I want to walk across the stage of my college graduation. No idea how I was going to do it. At the time, I was needing so much help with walking. I needed therapists to help pull my legs through. I had leg braces on. I had people supporting my weight to off weight me. And I just knew if I put this big goal out there that I was going to help me, one, stay accountable, right? If you're telling people you're going to do something, for me, like I got to do it. I got to follow through with it. I got to at least go down trying. So there was that, and then I was receiving a bunch of training. And well, this as the graduation weekend was getting closer, I began to realize that, one, I was in love with Emily. I just knew she was the one, that we were meant to be together. And then the other thing too, I walked the best with her, better than any of the therapists I've ever worked with. And she was also my toughest trainer. She was always pushing me to take one more step, do one more walk. And after a while, I walked better with Emily than anybody else. And so I knew she had to be the one that helped me. And so to add even more pressure to this big graduation day, where thousands of people are going to be watching you, I decided to propose to her the day before. And I was way more nervous. And thankfully, she said yes. Otherwise, the next day would have been really awkward. But it all worked out. But after, 4,500 hours of training and 4.5 years of perseverance, graduation day finally arrived. I was extremely nervous. I felt sick to my stomach because here I was training relentlessly for years to do just a short walk. And, what if I don't do it? Like, what if my body gets overheated and I can't take a step where I pass out? Or, what if people boo me off the stage? And because graduations are long, no one wants to be waiting around watching me walk across the stage. But once we got up there, she stood me up. The crowd just erupts into cheers, and I was able to take my steps uh, with, with great control, and everything just worked really well. And I was blown away by the response as that video would go viral, and over 300 million people would watch it. And we got to go on some of the largest talk shows in the country. It helped launch my motivational speaking business and grow my nonprofit, the Chris Norton Foundation.
That's just amazing. Yeah, yeah, it just started with that simple goal, but like you said, it went viral and was seen all over the world. You know, the movie 7 Yards uh, captures another uh, inspiring day of yours, uh, and that was your wedding day. And you also were motivated to walk 7 yards that day as well. Maybe walk us what walk us through what you remember about your wedding day and the 7 yards you walked that day.
Yeah, so then after the graduation walk, we decided that our next goal was to walk 7 yards down the aisle of our wedding. 7 yards, marking the 7 years since my injury anniversary. 7 yards was 3 yards further than the graduation walk. And then instead of her walking in front of me, which is how she helps me with the graduation and which what gives me the most support, we decided we're going to walk side by side the same way we'd spend the rest of our lives together. So that kicked off another round of just intensive training. But our whole goal and purpose with the wedding walk wasn't an act of love or commitment, which sounds great if it was the case, because we both knew like walking isn't important to our marriage. Like, I don't need to walk in order for Emily to love me, and I don't need to walk in order to feel good or better about my life. What we did it for was seeing the response to the graduation walk and knowing all the thousands of messages that we received of people sharing how inspired and empowered they were by watching this. And it's given them the hope and courage to persevere through their own challenges. And we wanted more people to find that strength within themselves. And if we can be that example by walking when it's not easy, when it's actually more inconvenient and way more work for us, then we'll do it because it means something to other people. And we wanted to give the world another dose of inspiration, really, because we try to live our lives not for ourselves, but for others. And what I found is your life is as rich as the lives you enrich. And that's something that I live by every single day. And so that's why we made this commitment to walk down the aisle. And then the pressure really kicked up because as we're training, People Magazine committed that they were going to be at the wedding to cover our walk. And then an award-winning film company started to produce a documentary on my life story, and they had already began filming, and they actually named the movie 7 yards before I could actually walk 7 yards. So I couldn't walk 5 or 6. It had to be 7. Well, and as we're getting ready for this big wedding day, then we also become foster parents, which was a huge change in our lives. That it wasn't how we drew it up, but we felt like we were called to do it, and we said yes. So we had a lot going on, but the wedding day was just beautiful. It went perfectly well, and I didn't have any nerves actually that day. Not nothing close to the graduation, and it was like a really interesting contrast in the two walks of being deathly nervous for graduation, then the wedding having so much peace. And I think it speaks to one, just my faith, and then also understanding what's most important, right? Like at the end of the day, I get the girl. Like that's what it matters. It's not about walking, it's about our marriage and our union together. And so I think I had my priorities and perspective in line. But then the walk went really well too. I was able to do the 7 yards down the aisle.
Well, that you certainly did have his priorities in line, and I know you know this, but you are certainly enriching so many lives, and one in particular is right here in front of you, and I can't thank you enough for that. You know, you touched briefly. You mentioned your faith. I know your parents have strong faith. That's one of the things that got them through, being the parents of somebody that was paralyzed in your situation. But what was your faith like, or how did your faith play a role in getting you to where you were the day of your wedding and beyond where you are today?
My faith it gave me hope when I was feeling really hopeless and alone. Before my injury, I had a faith. My parents thankfully dragged me to church every Sunday, and I was in Sunday school and did fellowship of Christian athletes, things like that. So I always had that there, but it was a kind of a faith that's the break glass in case of emergency faith. When I really needed it, when I felt like I couldn't do it on my own, then I would, turn to God. Uh, Whereas when I got injured, I I was put in a place where you can't do this on your own. Like you have to give up control and you have to really believe in him. And I had to wrestle with that. I mean, at first I was instantly like, God, give me strength, give me the ability to walk. And then as I'm processing it all, I was like, well, it says you have plans to prosper me, to give me hope in a future and not to harm me, which it says in Jeremiah. And this feels a lot like harm. I don't know how this is plans to prosper me. And so while there's times where I wrestled with that, at the end of the day, I knew, well, if I chose not to believe, I can pretty much tell you right now what my life would have looked like. It would have been doom and gloom and of hardship and sorrow, or I could choose to believe and really commit in my faith and trust in Him, and maybe there's a chance. Maybe there are plans to prosper me. I don't know what the future holds. It doesn't look good right now, but because of you, God, and because of what you say, I think there is a chance. So I'm gonna go for it. I'm gonna believe in you and see where this takes me. And thankfully, I've also had some good, strong, Christian parents and other friends and community members that helped, with that. But yeah, I went for it, and my faith really kind of carried me through in a time where um, I needed it. And then after that, I really started to just give thanks and recognize all the blessings in my life and not take anything for granted.
there are millions that are grateful that you did go for it because your story is inspiring so many. You know, you mentioned the foundation that you started. I know one of the things that the foundation supports is a camp for those that are also in wheelchairs. Maybe share with our listeners what takes place at the camp back in Iowa.
Yes, we run a summer wheelchair camp for individuals, children with physical disabilities, but also their entire families. So it's a family sort of experience, whereas it's not just the able-bodied individuals doing this, and then whoever's has this physical disability doing that. They're all doing it together. We're all everything's adaptive. There's 4 nights. We're zip lining, horseback riding, laser tag, sports, and other games and activities. It's just a really empowering week for these families and individuals. It's completely free of charge. So thanks to our donors and sponsors, we can keep it free for the entire family. It's really expensive life having a disability with all the medical equipment, devices, services, and care. So we want to take that financial burden off of families, and so it's just a great transformational time to have these kids come in to camp, with a oftentimes sometimes low self-esteem, uh, pretty discouraged about their future and what their life is going to look like. Are they going to make some really good friends? Are they going to get married and have a career and live a fulfilling life? And I think by the end of camp, everyone can see the possibilities and what's out there for them by applying themselves, putting themselves out there, and not being afraid to try.
You mentioned families, entire families come in. Your entire family gets involved in supporting the camp. What's that like for you to have your mom and dad and your sisters involved in supporting this camp?
Yeah, it's definitely a family affair. They're a huge part of the foundation. I mean, they are the foundation in a lot of ways because they're just that involved with the day-to-day things. And so it's just a lot of fun to together we can, take what was a tragic event and not let it be a tragedy. And that's one of the ways we do that is through this camp and giving back and helping others. Then I get my whole entire family involved too. I have all of my kids and Emily. We all come, and it's just a great way for them to meet and learn about other disabilities and other individuals who have challenges. And I think it's really eye opening, and it's really important for I think all children to involve and learn how to get past their own fears and insecurities when talking to somebody with a disability. I feel it all the time, and I can only imagine as kids if you're in a chair or another form of a physical disability. But there's a lot of people who are intimidated to talk to you. They don't know how to talk to you. They don't want to say the wrong thing, or they just stare or don't make conversation with you. And anybody can tell you who is in a situation like mine, you just want to be treated like everybody else. You want to be respected. You want to be treated with self worth and dignity. And that's all you can expect out of people. And you don't need to say the perfect thing. You just got to treat and lead with love. And I think this is a great way for not just adults but kids to learn those skills at an early age.
That's awesome. One thing that one saying I've loved for a long time, and it's nothing worth having in life comes easy, because if it did, everybody would have it. And your work and your commitment and your perseverance is one of the reasons why you're thriving today. And that is so inspiring. I'd like to ask you though, as you were maybe in periods of uh, doubt or concern or questioning what your life would look like, is there anybody in particular that inspired you?
Yeah, it was a lot of different things. We talked about my faith, uh, my dad, my mom, They're all my sisters, everybody, friends. They were all there for to be a shoulder to cry on, to encourage me, and to tell me it's worth it to keep trying, to keep going. So I think having just good relationships that can speak life into you um, was really important. And Emily, because there's times in life for anybody where you feel hopeless and you're feeling down, and to have that person that you can go to vent and kind of flush out the negativity with, and to recharge is uh, essential.
Thank you. So, as I think about the show, it's centered around gratitude. When you hear that word today, you think about the life that you're living today. What are you most grateful for today?
I think my family, and then also my, I think my understanding, my happiness and perspective that I have now. I think I have a better view on what it means to live a good life. Whereas before, it was how can I accomplish I wanted accomplishments. I wanted money. I wanted uh, the strength, like all those things, which are great. I'm not saying don't strive for those, but what I've come to realize again, it's your life is as rich as the lives you enrich, and being able to serve others and then to grow personally is what makes life so fun and fulfilling. And so I understand that now. And so I'm really grateful to have that understanding, and something that I can now pass on to my kids, and something I can share with my audiences so that they can live a purposeful and meaningful life. Because I think we're all trying to find meaning. And if you are looking for meaning by followers, likes, status, fame, accomplishments, those sort of things, you're going to find life to be pretty um, unmeaningful. It's not going to be as enriching as you want it to be, because those things, those moments of joy that you get from those are short lived, honestly. They're great, you can feel proud of, and you should go for them. But again, it's not what sustains a fulfilling life.
Chris, when you're talking about purpose and real deep like calling, I'm gonna ask you a difficult question here, but do you think some of that doesn't happen to you and you get to where you are without the accident?
I don't know if I would have came to it as fast as I have, right? I think I would have been still searching and trying to figure out what is the meaning of life? What's the meaning of my life? How do you live a good life? I think I'd still be looking for it at this point. And because of my injury, I had to grow up fast and learn a lot. And when you go through adversity like this, it really teaches you a lot about yourself and life. It's in life. So yeah, I don't think it happens without the injury.
That's amazing. So as we wrap up, Chris, I end each show with a pretty common question, but your hurdle that you faced is pretty evident. But that being said, is there something that you experienced during your recovery, rehabilitation that's helped you grow? And today, like you can, I mean, you just touched on it a little bit, your purpose, but could you expand on that just a bit more as to how you might even be grateful for some of the things that were caused as a result of the injury? I'd love to hear more perspective on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy now, being 12 years out, to see how all things have worked together for good and for something meaningful and purposeful. But when you're in it, you don't see it. Like when you're in the grind and the storm in the valley, you can't see like how this is all working together for your good. And so I want to just everybody's out there who's in that middle of that season right now, keep going. It doesn't make sense right now. It's not supposed to. But once you get through it, once you're able to keep going and not give up, you're going to get to a point where you realize everything that you've gone through had some sort of purpose or meaning behind it. But I will tell you that not all suffering has meaning, and it's up to us to give it meaning. And that's what also through my faith I can give meaning to the challenges that I've gone through. Otherwise, suffering is just suffering. And so I've been very intentional to keep working, to keep going, and then through hard work and faith, um, good things have come. And so I'm grateful for that, and how my injury has really launched the foundation. It's launched my motivational speaking. It's led me to Emily and then our children and being where we're living, and it's really enriched my life. And I'm thankful for the opportunities to give back and to serve others.
Well, that you certainly are, Chris Norton. You are inspiring so many people, and one is right here. As I walk my own cancer recovery journey myself, you're one individual that I love following, and keep doing what you're doing. You're enriching millions, and you'll continue to enrich millions more. Our goal with the show is to inspire our listeners to practice gratitude regardless of how powerful their storm is. You're inspiring individuals to live to their fullest and to understand that some of the hurdles that are right in front of them are teaching blocks that will allow them to become the individuals that they'll ultimately become. And sometimes it just takes looking through that hurdle with a slightly different lens. And you've done such a remarkable job of doing just that with your journey that you're on. Listening audience, go out and follow Chris Norton. Watch the movie. He will inspire you to live to your fullest. I think about three things each and every day as I walk the life that I'm walking today. And one of those things that keeps me grounded is gratitude. We got a show around gratitude. I try to find the courage to be grateful regardless of how powerful my storm is. Secondly, I truly try to be present to those that are right in front of us. It takes an army to get everybody to their fullest potential. Just be aware of the resources that are right in front of you. And lastly, pay attention to how you're feeding your mind, your body, and your soul. Today's guest was Chris Norton, who has inspired so many. Please go out and follow him. If today's show inspired you in some way, shape, or form, subscribe to the show, share it with others, and comment on it. With gratitude, Matt listeners, until next time, find the courage to be grateful. Godspeed, my friends.